In the heat of a Tennessee summer, a wealthy, retired businessman named Henry Albright finds himself stranded on a desolate road with a flat tire. But when a humble teenager, Evan Carter, appears out of nowhere and offers help asking for nothing in return, Henry's perfectly controlled world begins to shift. This one act of kindness sets off a chain of events that changes not only Henry's life, but an entire community. As their lives intertwine, hidden struggles are revealed, old wounds begin to heal, and unexpected bonds form. But how does a boy with a simple dream transform the heart of a man who thought he had everything? And what happens when life throws challenge their way that neither of them can face alone? Find out in this uplifting tale of generosity, resilience, and the enduring power of connection. If you're ready for a story that will leave you inspired, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to our channel. Don't forget to hit the notification bell so you don't miss what happens next. Let's dive into the story. The sun hung heavy in the Tennessee sky, bathing the landscape in an oppressive heat that shimmered off the asphalt. Henry Albright, once a titan of the business world, now retired and uncomfortably idle, sat behind the wheel of his silver Jaguar. The car's sleek design had always been a symbol of his success, but today, stranded on a desolate country road with a flat tire, it felt more like a mockery. He pressed the call button on his phone for the 5th time, hoping for a signal. Still nothing. With a frustrated sigh, Henry tossed the phone onto the passenger seat and leaned back, loosening his tie. Beads of sweat formed on his brow, and the car's air conditioning struggled to keep the suffocating summer air at bay. His meticulously planned day lunch at an upscale bistro, followed by a meeting with an old business partner to discuss a potential investment, was now derailed. It wasn't the inconvenience that bothered him most. It was the unfamiliar sense of helplessness. As he gazed out at the seemingly endless road ahead, a figure appeared in the distance. At first, it was little more than a mirage, shimmering in the heat. But as it drew closer, Henry made out the shape of a young boy, no older than 13 or 14. He wore a faded t-shirt and jeans that had seen better days, his sneakers scuffed and worn. The boy approached with steady steps, his gaze fixed on the car. Henry watched warily, unsure whether to feel relieved or uneasy. "Need some help, mister?" the boy called out, his voice carrying a tone of casual confidence that belied his youth. Henry hesitated, pride warring with practicality. "I suppose I do," he admitted. "Flat tire. And no signal out here." The boy nodded, stepping closer. His face was open and unguarded, with sharp, clear eyes that took in the situation with a maturity far beyond his years. "I can help with that," he said. "Do you have a spare?" "It's in the trunk," Henry replied, gesturing. He watched as the boy moved to the back of the car, opening the trunk with ease and pulling out the spare tire and a set of tools. The boy knelt beside the car, inspecting the flat. "Looks like you hit something sharp. Bad luck." He pulled out a jack and began working. "My grandpa taught me how to do this last summer. Said it's a skill everyone should have." Henry was taken aback by the boy's efficiency. He worked swiftly, loosening the lug nuts and replacing the tire with quiet focus. Henry leaned against the side of the car, feeling oddly out of place as he watched. "You seem pretty good at this," Henry said, breaking the silence. "Been doing it a while," the boy replied with a shrug. "Folks around here don't always have money for roadside assistance, so you learn to take care of things yourself." In less than 15 minutes, the boy stood and wiped his hands on his jeans, smudging them with streaks of grease. "All set," he said with a small, satisfied smile. Henry reached into his wallet, pulling out a crisp $100 bill. "Here," he said, holding it out. "I really appreciate your help." The boy looked at the bill for a moment, then shook his head. "Thanks, but I don't need anything." Henry blinked, unsure if he had heard correctly. "Take it," he insisted. "It's the least I can do." The boy stepped back, raising a hand in polite refusal. "I'm good, mister. Just happy to help." And with that, he turned and began walking down the road, his silhouette growing smaller with each step. Henry stood there, money still in hand, feeling an unexpected pang of something he couldn't quite name. It wasn't just gratitude, it was something deeper, something unsettling. Back in the driver's seat, Henry adjusted his rearview mirror, catching a final glimpse of the boy before he disappeared over the horizon. As he started the engine, his thoughts remained fixated on the encounter. He had encountered thousands of people in his lifetime: business partners, investors, employees, but this boy had left a mark. There was a quiet dignity about him, a self-assurance that seemed unshakable despite his modest appearance. The drive back to his estate felt longer than usual. Henry's sprawling mansion, perched on a hill overlooking the city, was a testament to his success. Yet as he pulled into the circular driveway and stepped inside, the marble floors and opulent decor felt cold and lifeless. He poured himself a glass of scotch and sank into his leather armchair, the memory of the boy replaying in his mind. He thought of the worn shoes, the faded clothes, the way the boy had refused the money with a polite smile. It was a stark contrast to the world Henry had inhabited for decades, a world where every action came with a price tag or an expectation. The next morning, Henry woke with a restlessness he hadn't felt in years. The boy's act of kindness had struck a chord, and he couldn't let it go. He drove back to the same stretch of road, stopping at a nearby gas station to ask if anyone knew a boy matching the description. "Sounds like Evan Carter," the clerk said, chewing gum. "Lives with his mom over in Larkspur. Good kid. Always helping folks." "Larkspur," Henry repeated, making a mental note. He thanked the clerk and set off, his curiosity deepening with every mile. Larkspur was a quiet town nestled among rolling hills, its streets lined with modest homes and small businesses. Henry's sleek car drew curious looks as he made his way through the town, asking for directions to the Carter's home. When he arrived, he found a small house with peeling paint and a sagging porch. Despite its worn exterior, there was a warmth to the place, a sense of life and resilience that Henry hadn't felt in his own home for years. He knocked on the door, and a woman in her early 40s answered. She had sharp eyes and a weary but kind expression. "Can I help you?" she asked, her tone cautious. "I believe I met your son yesterday," Henry said. "Evan, right? He helped me with a flat tire." The woman's face softened. "That sounds like Evan," she said. "He's always helping folks." "I just wanted to thank him properly," Henry said. She hesitated, then stepped aside. "He's out back working on the fence. You're welcome to come around." Henry followed her through the house, taking in the humble but tidy interior. The walls were adorned with family photos and hand-drawn pictures, the kind only a child could create. In the backyard, Evan was hammering a loose board into place. He looked up as Henry approached, his expression curious but untroubled. "Hey, mister," Evan said, wiping his hands on his jeans. "Didn't expect to see you here." Henry smiled, feeling strangely nervous. "I couldn't stop thinking about how you helped me," he admitted. "And I wanted to thank you again. What you did meant a lot." Evan shrugged, his easy smile returning. "It wasn't a big deal. To Henry it was, and he was determined to show it." Evan led Henry to the backyard where the boys' project, a section of a dilapidated fence, was in the process of being repaired. Scraps of wood lay scattered around, and a small pile of tools rested by his side. Henry stood awkwardly for a moment, watching as Evan adjusted the angle of a board. The boy's concentration was remarkable. He handled each piece of wood with care, as though the project was far more important than a simple backyard repair. "You're quite handy for someone your age," Henry remarked, breaking the silence. Evan glanced up with a smile. "Just stuff my grandpa taught me. He always said, if you can fix it yourself, you're halfway to being free." Henry chuckled softly, charmed by the wisdom in the boy's words. "Your grandfather sounds like a smart man." Evan nodded, his smile fading slightly. "He was. Passed away last year. I'm just trying to keep up with the things he started." Before Henry could respond, Angela stepped onto the porch, carrying a tray with glasses of lemonade. "Thought you might be thirsty," she said, setting the tray on a nearby table. Henry accepted a glass gratefully. "You've raised a remarkable young man," he said, nodding toward Evan. Angela's expression softened, though her guard remained. "He's got a good heart. Always has." As Henry prepared to leave, he hesitated by his car. The sight of the Carter home, the peeling paint, the sagging porch, the patched roof stirred something in him. He had spent his life acquiring wealth, but here was a family making do with so little yet radiating a warmth his mansion lacked. Before driving off, Henry left a note tucked under a jar of honey Angela had left on the table. The note read, "Thank you for reminding me of what really matters." The next day, Henry returned with a small gift, a new set of tools for Evan. "This is too much," Angela protested when he handed her the box. "We can't accept this." "It's not charity," Henry insisted. "It's gratitude. Your son helped me, and I want to repay that in a way that matters." Angela hesitated, her pride warring with practicality. But Evan's wide-eyed excitement at the sight of the tools softened her resistance. "All right," she said finally, but only because he could use them. Evan immediately began inspecting the tools, his face lighting up. "Thanks, mister," he said, his enthusiasm contagious. Henry felt an unexpected warmth spread through him. For the first time in years, he felt like he was doing something meaningful. Driving back to his estate, Henry found his thoughts drifting. His life had been a series of achievements, a carefully curated climb to the top. Yet, what did he have to show for it now? A sprawling mansion filled with expensive art, but no one to share it with. The boy's simple act of kindness had unearthed memories Henry hadn't visited in years. He remembered growing up in a small house not unlike the Carters, where his father worked long hours and his mother stretched every dollar. It had been a life of hard work and little luxury, but it had been rich in ways he hadn't appreciated then. Somewhere along the way, he had lost touch with those roots, consumed by ambition and the pursuit of success. Now, standing at the threshold of old age, he couldn't shake the feeling that he had missed something vital. Over the following weeks, Henry visited the Carters frequently, each time bringing a small token of appreciation: new paint for the porch, a sturdy workbench for Evan's projects, or fresh flowers for Angela's kitchen. At first, Angela remained cautious, wary of accepting too much. But Henry's sincerity was impossible to deny. His visits became less about gifts and more about conversations. He learned that Angela worked 2 part-time jobs to make ends meet, while Evan helped out wherever he could, often mowing neighbors' lawns or fixing small appliances. "It's not always easy," Angela admitted one afternoon, "but we get by. And I want Evan to know the value of hard work." "He's already learned it," Henry said, "and he's got a heart that money can't buy." Angela looked at him, her expression softening further. "You're not what I expected," she said quietly. "Neither is your son," Henry replied with a smile. Evan's fascination with building grew with each visit. One afternoon, he showed Henry a notebook filled with sketches of tree houses, bridges, and even a model of a small cabin. "Where did you learn to draw like this?" Henry asked, flipping through the pages. "Just stuff I imagine," Evan said, his cheeks reddening slightly. "I watch videos online about building things, and I try to figure out how they work." Henry saw the spark of ambition in the boy's eyes, and it stirred something in him. Evan wasn't just a helpful kid, he was a dreamer, someone who saw potential in every piece of wood, every bolt and beam. "You know," Henry said, tapping the notebook, "these ideas could take you places. You ever think about being an engineer?" Evan's eyes lit up. "All the time. I want to build things that last like bridges or skyscrapers." "Well, you're off to a great start," Henry said. One evening, Angela invited Henry to stay for dinner, a simple meal of roasted chicken and fresh vegetables. As they ate, laughter filled the small kitchen. Evan shared stories from school, Angela talked about the local community, and Henry found himself opening up about his own childhood. The meal was modest, but it felt warmer than any of the extravagant dinners Henry had attended in his lifetime. When he returned home that night, he stood in his grand dining room, staring at the long, empty table. The silence of his house pressed in around him, stark and unforgiving. For the first time in years, he felt the weight of his solitude. And for the first time, he realized he wanted something more. The air was cool as Henry stepped onto the Carters' porch one crisp morning. Evan was already outside, sandpaper in hand, smoothing out an old plank of wood. He looked up and grinned when he saw Henry. "Morning, mister," Evan called. "You're early today." "I figured I'd see what projects you've got going," Henry replied, stepping closer. He glanced at the plank Evan was working on. "What's that for?" "A new birdhouse," Evan explained. "The old one's falling apart, and the Wrens don't seem to like it much anymore. Henry watched the boy's steady hands, impressed by his attention to detail. Do you always take care of the little things around here? Someone's got to, Evan said with a shrug. Besides, it's fun to build things. Henry smiled, struck again by the boy's unassuming nature. Evan wasn't looking for recognition. He simply enjoyed creating, fixing, and helping. Angela emerged from the house, carrying a basket of laundry. She paused when she saw Henry, giving him a small nod. While her initial wariness had softened, there was still a barrier between them, an unspoken caution that lingered in her every interaction. You don't have to keep coming out here, you know, Angela said, her tone light but firm. I want to, Henry replied. Your family has been more welcoming than I deserve. Angela raised an eyebrow. You're not like most people I've met, Mr. Albright. But I've learned to be careful. We've been let down before. Henry nodded, understanding the layers of her hesitation. I'm not here to take anything from you, Angela. I just want to be helpful. Her gaze softened slightly. Well, Evan sure likes having you around, and he doesn't take to people easily. Later that afternoon, Evan led Henry to a small shed at the edge of the yard. Inside, scraps of wood, nails, and old tools were scattered across a makeshift workbench. This is where I do most of my building, Evan said, his voice tinged with pride. Henry scanned the room, noting the rudimentary setup. You've done a lot with very little, he said. Evan grinned. Mom says it's not about what you have, it's about what you do with it. Henry picked up a half-finished model of a bridge, its intricate design betraying the boy's skill and imagination. You really do want to be an engineer, don't you? Evan nodded. One day I'm going to build things that last forever. Henry felt a surge of admiration. You've got the drive. And if there's one thing I've learned, that's half the battle. The next time Henry visited, he brought a surprise, a set of high-quality drafting tools and a book on basic engineering principles. Evan's eyes lit up as he unpacked the gift. This is amazing, he exclaimed, flipping through the book. Angela, standing in the doorway, crossed her arms. You're spoiling him, she said, though her tone lacked its usual sharpness. I'm investing in him, Henry countered gently. He's got a talent that deserves to be nurtured. Angela hesitated, then nodded. Just don't let him forget the value of hard work. As the weeks passed, Henry became a regular presence at the Carter home. He helped Evan with his projects, painted the sagging porch with Angela, and even joined them for family dinners. One evening, as the three of them sat around the table, Evan asked, What made you want to start your businesses, Mr. Albright? Henry leaned back, considering the question. When I was young, I wanted to prove myself to show the world I could succeed. But somewhere along the way, I forgot why I started. I got caught up in the chase. Evan frowned thoughtfully. Do you regret it? Parts of it, Henry admitted. But meeting you and your mom, it's reminded me of what really matters. Angela glanced at Henry, her expression unreadable. But there was a flicker of something respect, perhaps, or understanding that hadn't been there before. One afternoon, Henry arrived to find Angela repairing a section of the roof. She was balanced precariously on a ladder, hammer in hand. Angela, what are you doing up there? Henry called. What does it look like? She shot back. Roof's leaking again. Can't wait around for someone else to fix it. Henry approached, concern etched on his face. You could get hurt. Let me call someone. I've got it, Angela replied firmly. We've been taking care of ourselves for a long time, Mr. Albright. We're not charity cases. Henry hesitated, then said, I know you don't need help, Angela. But everyone deserves a little support now and then. Angela paused, her hammer hovering midair. She climbed down slowly, meeting Henry's gaze. Why are you really doing all this? Because I see potential here, Henry said earnestly. And because your son taught me that helping isn't about obligation, it's about connection. Angela studied him for a long moment, then nodded. All right, you win this round. One rainy evening, Henry shared a story about his childhood, about growing up in a house much like the Carters, where his parents worked tirelessly to make ends meet. I've spent most of my life trying to get as far away from those days as possible, he admitted. But now, I realize they were some of the best days of my life. Angela listened quietly, her hands wrapped around a mug of tea. It's funny how we don't see the good until it's gone, she said. Henry nodded. Maybe that's why I'm here now, trying to hold on to something real. Evan's projects grew more ambitious as he practiced with the tools and techniques Henry taught him. One day, he unveiled a birdhouse unlike any Henry had ever seen, complete with intricate carvings and a slanted roof designed to keep rainwater from pooling. "This is incredible," Henry said, examining the craftsmanship. Evan beamed. "Think I can sell it? Maybe start saving for college?" Henry's heart swelled with pride. "I think you can do anything you set your mind to." As the days turned into weeks, Henry found himself looking forward to his visits more than he cared to admit. The Carters had become a second family to him, a source of warmth and purpose he hadn't felt in years. One evening, as he prepared to leave, Angela stopped him at the door. "You've done a lot for us," she said softly. "More than I can put into words." "You've given me more than I've given you," Henry replied. "Your family reminded me of what I lost along the way." Angela smiled faintly. "You're a good man, Henry Albright, even if you don't always believe it yourself." Henry arrived early one Saturday morning, greeted by the sound of hammering from the backyard. Evan was up before the sun, determined to finish his latest project, a new gate for the garden fence. "Morning, Evan," Henry said, stepping onto the porch. Evan turned, his face lighting up. "Morning, Mr. Albright. Check it out." He gestured to the half-finished gate, its sturdy frame and clean lines a testament to his growing skill. Henry examined it closely, nodding with approval. "You've got an eye for detail. Ever thought about apprenticing with a carpenter or contractor?" Evan shrugged, wiping his hands on his jeans. "That'd be cool, but those jobs aren't easy to come by around here. And I can't leave Mom alone too much. She's got enough on her plate." Henry felt a pang of admiration for the boy's selflessness. "Well, you let me know if you ever want to pursue something like that. I might know a few people who can help." Evan grinned. "Thanks, mister. I'll think about it." Later that morning, Henry helped Angela hang new curtains in the living room. The fabric was a cheerful floral pattern far from the austere shades that adorned his own home. "Evan mentioned you're working extra hours at the diner," Henry said, balancing on a step stool. Angela nodded as she smoothed the fabric. "Bills don't stop just because you're tired." Henry climbed down, his gaze thoughtful. "You work harder than anyone I know. Doesn't leave much time for yourself, does it?" Angela sighed. "When you're a parent, your time isn't yours. But I don't mind. Evan's worth it." Her words hung in the air, stirring something in Henry. He thought of his own parents, who had sacrificed so much for his education and dreams. How long had it been since he truly appreciated their efforts? "You've done an incredible job with him," Henry said quietly. Angela smiled, her usual guardedness softening. "He makes it easy." The next week, Henry showed up with a box of books he had purchased at a local thrift store. Titles like Intro to Engineering and Building Basics for Beginners filled the box, alongside a few novels. "I thought Evan might enjoy these," Henry said, setting the box on the kitchen table. Angela crossed her arms, her expression skeptical. "You've been bringing a lot of things lately, Mr. Albright." "They're not gifts," Henry replied. "They're investments. Evan's got talent, Angela. He just needs the tools to take it further." Angela sighed, but her expression softened as she opened the box and flipped through the books. "He'll like these. He's always got his nose in something." As Evan walked in and spotted the books, his face lit up. "Whoa, these are awesome," he exclaimed, pulling out a thick engineering guide. Henry grinned. "Thought you might like them." Angela watched the interaction quietly, her resistance slowly crumbling. One Sunday, Henry and Evan worked together on a new bench for the front porch. Evan handled the tools with confidence, while Henry fumbled with the hammer and nails. "You ever build anything before, Mr. Albright?" Evan asked, a teasing smile on his face. "Not much," Henry admitted, chuckling. "My hands were more suited to signing contracts than swinging hammers." "Well, you're doing fine," Evan said. "Just don't smash your thumb." By the end of the afternoon, the bench stood sturdy and straight, a product of their combined efforts. Henry sat on it, testing its strength. "Not bad," he said. "You might make a carpenter out of me yet." Evan laughed, the sound light and free. For Henry, it was a moment of pure joy, one he hadn't felt in years. One evening, Angela invited Henry to a small neighborhood potluck. It was held in the town's community center, a modest building decorated with string lights and handmade banners. At first, Henry felt out of place among the friendly, unpretentious crowd. But as the evening wore on, he found himself relaxing, enjoying the simple pleasures of shared food and laughter. He met Evan's friends and neighbors, each of whom had a story about how the Carters had helped them in some way. "They're the kind of people who make this town special," one older woman said. "Always giving, even when they don't have much to spare." Henry felt a deep sense of respect for Angela and Evan. Their generosity wasn't born of wealth, but of a genuine desire to make the world better. After the potluck, Angela walked with Henry to his car. The air was cool and quiet, filled with the chirping of crickets. "Thank you for coming tonight," she said. "I know this isn't your usual crowd." "I should be thanking you," Henry replied. "This is the most at home I've felt in years." Angela hesitated, then said, "You've done a lot for us, Henry. And I'll admit, I was skeptical at first, but I can see now that you mean it." Henry met her gaze, his voice steady. "Ido, your family has given me something I didn't even realize I was missing." Angela nodded, her expression unreadable. But there was warmth in her voice when she said, "Well, you're part of the community now. Don't forget that." Henry's visits became a regular part of the Carters' lives. He brought small gifts, shared meals, and offered advice when Evan asked for it. One day, Henry showed Evan a pamphlet for a summer engineering program in Nashville. "You should apply for this," he said. Evan's eyes widened as he read the pamphlet. "It looks amazing, but it's expensive." "Don't worry about that," Henry said. "I'll cover the cost. You've got the talent, Evan. Don't let anything hold you back." Evan hesitated, then smiled. "Thanks, Mr. Albright. I'll do my best." Angela watched as Evan threw himself into the application process, his excitement contagious. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to feel hope that her son's dreams could become reality. Henry, too, found a renewed sense of purpose. Helping the Carters had given his life meaning, filling a void he hadn't known was there. Together, they formed an unlikely team, united by a shared belief in Evan's potential. The days passed in a comfortable rhythm. Henry continued to visit the Carters, becoming a fixture in their lives. Evan immersed himself in his application for the engineering program, while Angela began to trust Henry enough to share more about their struggles. One evening, as the three of them sat on the porch watching the sun dip below the horizon, Evan turned to Henry. "What's the hardest thing you've ever built, Mr. Albright?" Henry thought for a moment. "It wasn't a building or a business," he said. "It was rebuilding myself after losing my way." Evan frowned, curious. "What do you mean?" "I spent so much of my life chasing success," Henry explained. "I didn't realize I'd left behind the things that really mattered: family, friendships, connection. It's hard to fix something when you don't even know it's broken." Angela glanced at him, her expression thoughtful. "Well, you're fixing it now," she said quietly. One fateful evening, the wind picked up, rustling the leaves on the trees surrounding the Carters' house. Dark clouds gathered, blotting out the last light of day. Angela stood at the window, watching as the storm rolled in. "Looks like a big one," she murmured. The rain started as a gentle patter, but quickly escalated into a downpour. Lightning illuminated the sky, followed by the crack of thunder. "Mom, the roof's leaking again," Evan called from the living room. Angela grabbed a bucket and rushed to place it under the dripping ceiling. "We'll have to manage," she said, her voice tense. But the storm was relentless. The wind howled, and the house shuddered as branches battered the walls. By the time the storm subsided in the early hours of the morning, the damage was clear. The roof was badly compromised, a section of the back wall had buckled, and the small shed in the yard had collapsed entirely. When Henry arrived the next morning for his usual visit, his heart sank at the sight of the damage. Angela stood in the yard, surveying the destruction with a weary expression, while Evan tried to salvage what he could from the ruined shed. "This is worse than I thought," Henry said, stepping out of his car. Angela crossed her arms, her jaw tight. "We'll figure it out. We always do." "You can't stay here like this," Henry said. "The roof could cave in any minute." Angela hesitated, her pride battling against the reality of their situation. "We don't have a choice," she said finally. "Yes, you do," Henry insisted. "Let me help." We can fix this together. Angela looked at him, her defenses wavering. After a long pause, she nodded. Okay, but we're helping too. This is our home. Henry sprang into action, reaching out to contacts and contractors he had worked with in the past. He also enlisted the help of the Carter family's neighbors, who were eager to pitch in. Within days, the yard was a hive of activity. Trucks rolled in carrying lumber and shingles, while volunteers cleared debris and began assessing the repairs. Evan watched in awe as the workers measured, cut, and hammered with practiced precision. He spent every moment he could at their side, asking questions and learning the basics of construction. "You've got a natural curiosity," one contractor said, handing Evan a tape measure. "Keep that up, and you'll go far." Though Angela was grateful for the help, she couldn't shake the discomfort of relying so heavily on others. One afternoon, as she worked alongside Henry to clear rubble, she voiced her concerns. "This doesn't sit right with me," she said. "We've always managed on our own." Henry paused, leaning on his shovel. "There's strength in accepting help, Angela. You've given so much to this community. Now it's their turn to give back." Angela sighed. "I just don't want Evan to think life hands you things for free." "He won't," Henry assured her, "because he sees how hard you've worked. This isn't about charity, it's about lifting each other up." As the repairs progressed, Henry decided to surprise Evan with something special. He ordered a new swing set to replace the old, rusted one in the backyard. When the workers finished assembling it, Evan's face lit up with pure joy. "This is amazing," he said, running to test the swings. Angela watched from the porch, her eyes misty. "You didn't have to do that," she said to Henry. "I wanted to," he replied. "Every kid deserves a place to play." For Henry, the swing set was more than just a gift. It was a symbol of the childhood Evan deserved, a reminder that joy could exist even in difficult times. Over the weeks, the house began to take shape. The roof was reinforced, the back wall rebuilt, and the interior repainted. The once tired home now stood as a beacon of resilience and unity. On the final day of renovations, the neighbors gathered to celebrate. They brought food and drinks, turning the occasion into an impromptu block party. Evan proudly showed off the repairs, his enthusiasm infectious. "Check out the new porch," he said, leading his friends to the freshly painted deck. Henry stood back, watching the scene with a sense of fulfillment he hadn't felt in years. This wasn't just a house, it was a home, filled with life, laughter, and hope. In the weeks following the renovations, life at the Carter home felt transformed. The repairs had done more than fix the structure, they had brought a new energy to the family. Angela found herself smiling more, the weight of constant worry somewhat lifted. Evan, now armed with the tools and encouragement Henry had given him, worked on increasingly complex projects. One afternoon, Henry sat on the porch watching Evan sketch designs for a treehouse. "You've got quite the imagination," Henry said, sipping his iced tea. Evan grinned. "It's not just imagination, Mr. Albright. I'm going to build this." Henry chuckled. "That's the spirit. And when you do, I'd love to see it." Just as life seemed to settle into a comfortable rhythm, an unexpected event shook the newfound stability. Henry, while tending to his garden one morning, felt a sharp pain in his chest. He staggered, clutching his side, before collapsing onto the ground. A neighbor, seeing him through the fence, called for an ambulance. The news spread quickly to the Carters. Angela and Evan rushed to the hospital, their concern overriding everything else. When they arrived, a nurse led them to Henry's room. He was pale but awake, an oxygen tube under his nose. Angela sat by his side, her usual reserve replaced by worry. "You scared us," she said softly. Henry managed a weak smile. "Guess I'm not as invincible as I thought." Henry's health scare forced a shift in dynamics. Angela, who had always been the one receiving help, now found herself stepping up to support Henry. She brought meals to his house during his recovery, while Evan mowed his lawn and helped tidy up the garden. "You've done so much for us," Angela said one afternoon, placing a casserole dish in Henry's oven. "It's only right we return the favor." Henry, sitting in his armchair, felt an unexpected swell of gratitude. "You've already given me more than I could ever repay. It means a lot." During Henry's recovery, Evan spent more time than ever working on his designs. Inspired by the workers who had repaired their home, he began drafting plans for a small shed to replace the one lost in the storm. One afternoon, he showed Henry the plans. "What do you think?" Evan asked, his voice tinged with nervous excitement. Henry studied the design, impressed by the level of detail. "This is incredible, Evan. You've got a real gift." Evan beamed. "I want to build it myself. Do you think I can?" "I don't think," Henry said with a smile. "I know." As Henry regained his strength, Angela invited him to a family dinner at their newly renovated home. The table was set with mismatched plates and silverware, and the smell of roasted chicken filled the air. During the meal, Evan talked excitedly about his plans for the shed and the engineering program he hoped to attend. Angela shared stories about her late husband, who had been a skilled mechanic with a knack for fixing anything. "I think Evan gets it from him," Angela said, her eyes soft with nostalgia. Henry listened intently, feeling a deep sense of connection to the family. For the first time in years, he felt like he belonged. Evan's application to the summer engineering program hit a snag when the acceptance letter arrived, along with a hefty tuition bill. Angela's face fell as she read the letter. "This is more than we can afford," she said, handing it to Henry. Henry glanced at the amount, his mind already working. "Don't worry about the cost," he said firmly. "I'll take care of it." Angela hesitated. "Henry, I appreciate everything you've done, but this is too much." "It's not too much," Henry said. "Evan deserves this opportunity. Let me do this for him." After a long pause, Angela nodded. "All right, but you've got to let me make you dinner every week as repayment." Henry laughed. "Deal." The weeks leading up to Evan's departure for the program were filled with a flurry of activity. Henry helped Evan prepare by buying him a set of drafting tools and a sturdy backpack. Angela packed his bags, slipping in notes of encouragement. On the morning of his departure, the entire neighborhood gathered to see him off. Evan stood on the porch, holding his suitcase, while his friends and neighbors offered hugs and well wishes. "You're going to make us proud," Angela said, her voice thick with emotion. Evan hugged her tightly. "I'll do my best, Mom." As Evan boarded the bus, he turned to Henry. "Thank you for everything, Mr. Albright. I wouldn't be here without you." Henry placed a hand on the boy's shoulder. "You did this, Evan. I just gave you a little push. Now go show them what you're made of." Evan grinned, then climbed onto the bus. As it pulled away, Angela and Henry stood side by side, watching until it disappeared from view. "He's going to do great things," Angela said softly. "He already has," Henry replied. With Evan away, the Carter home felt quieter than ever. Angela busied herself with work, while Henry found solace in tending to his garden. One evening, as he watered the roses, he thought about the path his life had taken. Helping the Carters had given him a sense of purpose he hadn't felt in decades. And though he missed Evan's energy and curiosity, he knew the boy was exactly where he needed to be. Weeks later, a letter arrived from Evan. In it, he described the engineering program in vivid detail, the projects he was working on, the friends he had made, and the lessons he was learning. "He sounds so happy," Angela said, reading the letter aloud to Henry. Henry smiled, pride swelling in his chest. He's living his dream, and he's just getting started. In the weeks following Evan's departure, Henry found himself with more time to reflect. He spent his mornings tending to his garden, a quiet ritual that brought him a sense of peace. The roses he had planted years ago were blooming beautifully now, a reminder of the patience required to nurture something worthwhile. Angela stopped by one afternoon, carrying a basket of fresh-baked muffins. "Thought you might like a little company," she said, setting the basket on the patio table. Henry smiled. "I'd like that." They sat together, sharing updates about Evan's program and trading stories from their pasts. For the first time, Henry opened up about his own parents, how they had worked tirelessly to give him opportunities, and how he regretted losing sight of their values as he climbed the corporate ladder. Angela listened intently. "It sounds like you found your way back," she said. Henry nodded. "Thanks to you and Evan, I have." One evening, Henry sat in his study, surrounded by the engineering sketches Evan had sent him. His gaze fell on a framed photo of the Carters' newly renovated home, a picture he had taken during the block party celebration. an idea began to take shape. What if he could create opportunities for other young people like Evan? What if his wealth could serve a greater purpose than just sitting in bank accounts and investments? The next morning, Henry made a series of phone calls. By midday, he had a plan. He would establish a foundation to support underprivileged youth pursuing careers in engineering and other fields. When Henry shared his idea with Angela, she was surprised. "You want to start a foundation?" she asked, sipping her coffee. "Yes," Henry said, "and I want you to be part of it. Who better to help me ensure it reaches the right people?" Angela hesitated. "I don't know anything about running a foundation." "You know what it's like to struggle," Henry said. "You know what it means to have someone believe in you. That's more valuable than any business degree." After a moment, Angela smiled. "All right, let's do it." Within months, the Carter Albright Foundation was officially launched. Its mission was simple: to provide scholarships, mentorship programs, and resources for young people with big dreams but limited means. Angela handled outreach, connecting with local schools and community centers to identify candidates. Henry focused on fundraising and building partnerships with businesses that could offer apprenticeships and internships. The foundation's first event was a modest affair held in the town's community center. Henry stood at the podium, his voice steady as he addressed the crowd. "This foundation is a testament to what can happen when people come together to lift each other up," he said. "It's not just about money, it's about believing in potential, the way someone believed in me when I was young, and the way Evan reminded me of what truly matters." The applause was thunderous, and Henry felt a swell of pride and purpose. Months later, Evan returned home from the engineering program for a short break. He was taller, more confident, and full of stories about his experiences. "Mr. Albright," Evan exclaimed, running to hug Henry when he arrived at the Carter house. "You wouldn't believe the things I've learned." Henry beamed. "I'm proud of you, Evan, but I never doubted you for a second." Evan spent the afternoon showing Henry and Angela his new sketches, including a blueprint for a bridge design he hoped to present at a competition. "You've come a long way," Henry said, studying the intricate details. "This is impressive." Evan grinned. "It's just the beginning." Evan was thrilled to learn about the Carter Albright Foundation. "You really started this because of me?" he asked, his voice tinged with awe. "Because of you and your mom," Henry replied. "You reminded me of the importance of investing in people, not just businesses." Evan nodded thoughtfully. "One day, I want to do something like this, help people the way you helped me." Henry placed a hand on Evan's shoulder. "You're already doing that, Evan, and I have no doubt you'll keep making a difference." Evan's passion for helping others manifested in unexpected ways. He began volunteering at the foundation, mentoring younger students, and sharing his journey. His enthusiasm was infectious, inspiring others to pursue their dreams. One day, while helping a student with a design project, Evan said, "The most important thing I've learned is that success isn't just about what you build. It's about how you use it to lift others up." Henry overheard the conversation, his heart swelling with pride. Henry took Evan on a trip to the city where he had grown up, showing him the modest neighborhood that had shaped his early years. They visited Henry's childhood home, now occupied by another family. "This is where it all started," Henry said, his voice tinged with nostalgia. "And now, thanks to you, I feel like I've come full circle." Evan looked at him with admiration. "You've done so much, Mr. Albright. You should be proud." "I am," Henry said. "But what I'm most proud of is the legacy we're building together." The foundation's success brought new opportunities to the town of Larkspur. Businesses partnered with the foundation to provide internships, and several scholarship recipients went on to attend prestigious universities. Angela became a respected figure in the community, known for her dedication to helping others. Evan's achievements inspired other young people to dream big, proving that determination and support could change lives. Years later, Henry, now in his late 70s, sat on the Carter's porch, watching Evan, a young man now, help a stranded motorist along the same stretch of road where their story had begun. When Evan returned, he smiled at Henry. "Paying it forward," he said simply. Henry nodded, his voice steady. "That's what it's all about." As the sun set, the three of them sat together, basking in the warmth of a life, well-lived, a life defined not by wealth or status, but by the connections they had built and the lives they had touched. The town of Larkspur looked different now. Small changes had accumulated over the years: new businesses, freshly paved roads, and a sense of pride that seemed to radiate from its residents. The Carter Albright Foundation had become a cornerstone of the community, its scholarships and mentorship programs inspiring a new generation of dreamers and builders. It was a warm spring day when the foundation hosted its 10th anniversary gala, held in a renovated community hall that bore a plaque in honor of Henry Albright. The hall was filled with students, parents, and professionals whose lives had been touched by the foundation. Evan, now in his late 20s and a successful civil engineer, stood at the podium. He looked out at the crowd, his gaze lingering on Henry, who sat in the front row beside Angela. Though Henry's hair had turned white and his steps were slower, his presence was as commanding as ever. This foundation started with one act of kindness. Evan began, his voice steady. Mr. Albright didn't just help us rebuild our home, he gave us hope, and he showed me the power of believing in someone. Today, we celebrate not just his generosity, but the countless lives he's changed through his vision. The audience erupted in applause, but Henry waved it off with a modest smile. After the gala, Henry and Angela walked through the quiet streets of Larkspur, reminiscing about the journey that had brought them here. "You've done something remarkable," Angela said, her tone filled with admiration. Henry shook his head. "We've done something remarkable. I couldn't have done this without you and Evan." Angela smiled. "You know, you've given this town more than just a foundation. You've given it a future." A few months later, Evan made a surprise announcement. He had been offered a position on a major infrastructure project, designing bridges in a major city. Though it meant moving away from Larkspur, he promised to stay deeply involved with the foundation. Angela struggled with the idea of her son leaving, but Henry reminded her of the bigger picture. "This is what you raised him for," Henry said gently. "To take his talents and make a difference. And he'll always come back home." Evan hugged his mother tightly before he left. "I'll make you proud," he promised. In his final years, Henry spent more time at the Carter home, now a bustling hub of activity with neighbors dropping by and volunteers from the foundation working on new projects. One afternoon, Henry sat in the backyard, watching as Angela pruned her rose bushes. A sense of peace washed over him, a quiet contentment he hadn't felt in decades. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden glow over the yard, Henry thought about how far they had come. The boy who had changed his tire on a lonely road had, in turn, changed his life. When Henry passed away peacefully at the age of 80, the entire town of Larkspur came together to honor him. His funeral was held in the community hall he had helped rebuild, attended by hundreds of people whose lives he had touched. Evan delivered the eulogy, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "Henry Albright taught me that success isn't about what you have, it's about what you give. He gave us hope, friendship, and a legacy that will live on for generations. And for that, we will always be grateful." The Carter Albright Foundation continued to thrive, expanding its reach to neighboring towns and inspiring similar initiatives across the region. Evan became one of its most prominent ambassadors, mentoring students and advocating for the importance of community support. Angela, now a respected elder in the community, remained deeply involved in the foundation, ensuring Henry's vision endured. And in Larkspur, the memory of Henry Albright lived on, not just in plaques or buildings, but in the lives of those who had been lifted by his generosity. If you enjoyed this heartfelt story about kindness, resilience, and the power of giving back, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us share more inspiring stories like this one. Hit that notification bell so you never miss a new upload. Let's keep spreading positivity one story at a time. Thank you for watching.